Good day, ladies and gents. This is Red Ice Radio. Our website is redicecreations.com. My name is Henrik, and as always, it's very good to have you with us, either if you're a regular listener or a newcomer to the program. And today we have Jim Elvidge back with us on the program. We first had Jim with us in March of last year, and he is, of course, the author of The Universe Solved. And we have quite a few things on the plate here today that we're going to focus on. Primarily the singularity, infomania, and programmed reality. The technological singularity is something that we've talked on and off about on this program. And Jim wrote to me with some really interesting points from an article he recently written that is basically suggesting that the singularity might not happen anytime soon, or maybe not at all. We'll discuss why this might be the case here today. There's also some recent news that seem to suggest the idea of a programmed reality, like the recent Geo 600 gravitational wave detector in Germany that have been having some issues. And also we're going to get into this idea more about the infomania, the basic flood of the information, how kind of the systems and the computers and everything is kind of clogging up in a way with information, and least of all our brains much in the same way. There's just too many interruptions during the workday with emails, with text messages and what have you. So this is some of the things that we'll dive into here today. The website, of course, that you can follow along in during the program, or definitely spend some time on later on, is theuniversesolved.com, and there you can read more about the book. There's articles, a blog up there that follow along, and many of the news stories that come out that kind of support the idea of a programmed reality. So much information up there for you to check out, theuniversesolved.com. Okay, Jim, welcome back to the program. Very nice to have you with us again.
Thank you very much, Henrik, and I'm very pleased to be back on the program.
It's going to be really interesting. There's so many fascinating ideas here that we want to discuss here today. But basically, maybe we can just do a quick run-through of the theory about a programmed reality. I think that will give us a good background as we move into some of these other areas here. So, if you will, what is some of the evidence that we are, or might be rather, living in a programmed reality, Jim?
Sure, I'd be glad to run through that quickly. Basically, the idea is that in a programmed reality idea, everything that you perceive is under program control or is generated by some computational mechanism. And people often think of the movie The Matrix or things like that, where a simulation is sort of injected into your mental process. And in that movie, it was injected to your brain. But it's not necessarily the only way that a programmed reality could be generated. Basically, the physical reality that we experience could theoretically be generated under program control. Nanotech provides several mechanisms to do that over the probably, I'd say, 60 to 80 year time frame. There's molecular assemblers which can generate almost any kind of matter or any kind of form of matter through a computational mechanism. And then there's a concept of the utility fog, which is a JSTOR's Hall concept, where you could have zillions of nanobots basically that are networked together and are able to reflect light in a certain way, or to sort of link physically and provide force against you. So you could theoretically not see them, and then under program control they could turn into a wall or a road to drive on or something like that. And these are some of the more kind of far out concepts of nanotech, but all things that could theoretically be accomplished within our technology within 60 to 80 years. The other sort of evidence that such a concept is possible just comes from video games. And if you go into an electronic superstore and you see some of the games that are running on TV these days, football, soccer games, skiing simulations, and things like that, they look so realistic that you can't tell the difference between those and a real sports event, for example. So we've gotten to the point already where we're fooling our visual senses in terms of alternate realities. We can if we could put on a device goggles, if you will. Now, I know that some of the virtual reality goggles aren't quite there in terms of resolution yet, but they're getting close. If you could put those on and experience this from a visual standpoint, you're completely or nearly completely fooled even now into thinking that you're in a different reality. From an audio standpoint, it's very easy to replicate what we experience in reality through headphones and high-quality sound reproductions, and then it's just a matter of the other senses. And this doesn't have to be done in a kind of a tactile manner. It could again be done a la The Matrix with an implant in the brain, for example, that intercepts your sensory inputs and replaces them with something that's under program control. Brain-computer interfaces are, definitely a technology now that is being pursued rapidly.
Yes.
Blind people are able to see rudimentary grids of light and perceive motion through interface with small cameras. So it's, again, Moore's Law will make all of this stuff possible within 20 or 30 years. So the question has been, if it's possible in 20 or 30 years, if physical manifestation of reality is possible in 60 to 80 years, maybe it's already happening. In fact, there are a lot of logical arguments that it is already happening. One of the most common ones referred to is Nick Bostrom's simulation argument, and people can Google that on the web and find that paper. It's really well written, and it basically provides the logical argument that it's very likely that we're already living in a simulation. Then there's evidence from the fields of quantum mechanics. Basically, the nature of reality being discrete is very much like a computer program or the way the world is modeled in say a role-playing game or something on a computer. The fine-tuned universe from the fields of cosmology, the way our universe is perfectly finely tuned, is very much evidence that it's designed in some way. Doesn't necessarily have to be under programmatic control, but it does kind of lend itself to the idea that it's under some sort of design concept. So all of these things, evidence from the field of philosophy, from quantum mechanics, from cosmology, and basically I would even put out there that all of these sort of scientific and metaphysical anomalies that exist are things that can be generated easily under program control. I could write a program, any good software developer could write a program that simulates these things, and it's really the only theory that explains all of them at once. So that's kind of in a nutshell a big chunk of the sort of categories of evidence that we're likely to live in a programmed reality.
Yes.
Again, as I mentioned before, Henrik, I'm not necessarily a 100% believer, but when I start stacking up the evidence, it sure seems like it's a very likely scenario. And I keep seeing more and more things that happen in our world and happen in the fields of science, discoveries. Thermodynamics is another area where people realize that space is filled with energy. Energy is equivalent to information, and space being information is basically just another way of saying that space is under program control.
Really, really interesting. There's so much to that, and I definitely agree with you in regards to that. Something really weird is going on in that sense. We can even, as you say, we can look at the composition of our own solar system, how the relationship between the moon, the sun, and the earth, how all of this seems, like a mechanism that someone almost, put into place there. How about the idea of a creator or a god in that sense? Is that something they also kind of incorporate into that whole theory or idea?
Sure, and there, you have to be a little careful, I guess, about the use of the word God. I tend to separate it, by saying it's a God with a small g rather than a capital G.
Right.
Human civilization has evolved to accept religions that help people be comfortable with, with the idea of a creation, or help explain some of these things so people don't feel alone or isolated. have a anarchy type of society. So that's one aspect of it. But when you talk about, if our world is created, who is it created by? Would by definition be a god? And you could use that word in that term. So if it's some, programmer in some other galaxy that has created this simulation that we are living in, by definition, I would have to say that they could be our god. But I don't use that in the sort of religious sense of the word.
I understand. Yep, gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about some of the more recent news here in regards to this the GEO 600, as it called. Maybe you can just give us a brief background on what it is, but basically that gravitational wave detector in Germany and some recent events there that seems to suggest or give credence at least to the idea of programmed reality. Tell us more about that, Jim.
Sure. Now the GEO 600 is a gravitational wave detector in Hanover, Germany, and there are a number of those throughout the world. And what they're trying to do is develop very, very sensitive devices that can detect something that has yet to be detected, which is the idea of a gravitational wave. We know that we have, gravity on our planet because of Newton's law and the fact that things, follow that law and tend to fall. However, and the way that the solar system is constructed and so forth. However, to have a changing gravitational field generated by perhaps a supernova or a black hole or a rotating black hole or something, some distant perturbation in the universe would help physicists to move along their model of reality and the different forces and how they all interrelate. So one of the schools of physics is to build these gravitational detectors, and they tend to be very long, sort of like a particle accelerator style constructions that use lasers and interferometers to detect very small differences in an effect that might be influenced by gravity from space, not from our planet. And they have to be really, really sensitive to detect this because the gravitational effects from other galaxies or other events in our galaxies are so small, and they have to overcome all of the gravitational fluctuations that might occur on our own planet, effects of the moon, effects of other planets, and things like that. So it's a very, very difficult experiment to put together. But probably one of the most sensitive ones in the world is this one in Hanover, Germany. And it's called GEO 600, and I think it's a 600-meter long laser-based gravitational wave detector. But one of the things that they've been having a lot of trouble with is they've been receiving, as the output of the signal of the detector, noise. And, noise happens in a lot of electrical experiments or physical experiments, and you just have to kind of understand